Most fly fishermen, this is what we want to see. We love to dry fly fish. There's the action, there's the adventure, there's seeing everything in front of you. And when we really look at a hatch, this is what we really want to see. This excites us. In this particular case, this is a modest blue-winged olive hatch here in Idaho. For a lot of anglers, this looks familiar. This is what we're used to seeing during a hatch. We want to see a lot of fish on the surface. We want to see a lot of bugs on the surface, and we get excited. This is what we're all about. This is what we want to do. And for some anglers, they don't even know what a hatch looks like, or what to do, or what's really happening in front of them. In this particular case, this is what it looks like, and what you should be looking for when you see yourself in front of rising fish. At this point, it becomes simple. If you notice throughout this segment, you can see small size 22 blue-winged olives floating by. If you replay this again and again, you'll see these little blue-winged olives floating down the water and trout eating them. This is what we see, and this is what we have to imitate. And the frustrating part is we're trying to do that, and our fly is ignored. Trout may come up and look at it and swim away. This is a refusal. What we want to do right now is take a good look at the anatomy of a refusal.
Hey, welcome back to the channel. I'm Mike, the old fish hobo, and I don't know about you, but it's pretty frustrating when I see trout rising in front of me during a hatch, any kind of hatch, say a blue-winged olive hatch or a caddis hatch, and I see them out there. I know what they're eating, and I roll my fly out there and nothing, just goes right by them. And I make the perfect cast right in front of their nose, nothing. And so I change flies, and I roll that fly out there, and I see it floating down there. And here it comes, here's the strike. I see the fish come up, and it kind of looks at it a little bit, and down it goes. Well, that's called a refusal. And probably has happened to all of us. And there's a lot out there that what you can do when there is a refusal. You could try a different pattern. You can try a smaller size. You can change to a smaller diameter tippet. And, I've heard them all, and they're all sound advice. However, we need to go a little bit beyond that and really look into the scientific view of what's causing that behavior in a trout that refuses your trout or your fly. Now, to really understand what's going on is this. What causes a trout to eat that natural blue-winged olive, what causes it to eat that, sure, we could say it's hunger, but it's really a triggered behavior. So the difference between a trout feeding at the surface and a trout feeding at the bottom is at the surface, it's called a triggered behavior or a triggered feeding behavior. And what causes a trout to take a fly on the bottom is called a conditioned or learned behavior. They learn anything coming in front of them when I'm hungry can be food. Up here, that's not like that. So what causes that trout to eat that natural blue-winged olive is it's triggered to take that blue-winged olive. And what causes a trout to take your artificial fly is the same behavior. It's a triggered behavior. Now, having said that, let's look at this thing called trigger. What is a trigger? What do you mean triggered behavior? So first of all, what gets a trout to even begin to eat is, it can be down there all day. It hasn't eaten anything all day. It hasn't seen anything all day. Trout don't hunt. They stay basically in one area or one spot all day, and they're just down there hoping something comes by. If they're hungry, if they're not hungry, it doesn't matter. But they're not seeing much. They have that horizontal view. They're looking right at the river in front of them, off to the sides, and they're waiting for something to come down that may be food that will find someplace in their target view. What gets them to go from there to the surface? Okay, they get hungry, but there's nothing really there to get them to look up, because if they look up, all they're going to see is a mirror image of the bottom of the river. It's a mirror up there. So they look up and they just see a vision of the surface, or they're seeing empty water. But what really gets a trout to look up is what we call movement in the water. It's the same thing that gets you to look up. A helicopter flies over, and you look up. In our case, when trout sees feeding or aquatic insects just coming through like that, they have the ability to learn, and since they were a sprig out of an egg, this is a signal where food will be at the surface. Now their eyes become vertically set at the surface. So that's generally what sparks a trout to feed at the surface, is that movement in the water, or that helicopter flying over now where they're looking up. Before, all they see, they can't even see their hand. When they look up now, they can't see their hands down here. So it's called a vertical view, and up they go. That's where the food is. That's where they've learned that food will be. And now the trigger mechanism becomes very, very important. And what we're trying to do is imitate as best we can the natural, so that we can trigger that trout to take our fly. Now, when we look at the anatomy of a refusal, okay, your fly does not look like the natural. Therefore, we did not trigger that trout to take our fly. So what is this trigger mechanism what causes them to pull the trigger and take that strike? It's called a trigger mechanism. There's basically three things that has to happen. In order of importance, it has to make an image or impression on or in the meniscus. So they can't see through the mirror, but they can see anything in the mirror. And that is the most important trigger, because that's being triggered at a distance. So when a trout looks straight up, it sees the clouds and birds and things. It's called a window of vision, or window of vision. But when they look that way out, all they see is a mirror. And that's where we're getting them with that impression. So we want to make sure that our emerger or our adult fly is making an impression or image in the mirror, as we air breathers like to call it, or the surface, or the meniscus. That's really the critical point, especially on freestyle rivers when there's no fish rising. We need to make sure that we accomplish the first trigger mechanism. So the first trigger mechanism is image or impression of the fly in the surface. The second one in order of importance is the size of your aquatic, or your natural, or your artificial fly has to be the same size as the natural. And number three, it has to be the right color. So if the blue-winged olives are on the water and they have a bright olive body and you're matching it with a bright olive fly, you're going to do real well. If you're matching it with or if the blue-winged olive has a black body and you're matching it with a bright olive body, then odds are you're not going to catch a lot of fish. You'll still trigger a strike here and there, but you won't catch as many trout as if you had triggered that trout. You're going to be getting instead refusals. And what's happening is that even though you have what you believe to be the matching pattern for that blue-winged olive, you are now triggering that trout with your image or impression in the surface, and now that trout is now triggered, and it's going right up to that fly, or it's triggered. It's got it. It's coming. And then when it reaches the window where it can see it brightly and clearly, okay, then it has to be the right size or the right color. If not, then you're just saw it refused. Now there's a lot of funny names out there, you know, for this refusal, and that's what you're seeing. So what we need to do when we see that is we need to change flies, or we need to find a fly that's going to match that exact natural. That's where having a lot of flies helps. We need to determine whether or not that fly, those trout are taking the emergent blue-winged olive, or are they taking the adult blue-winged olive. Now, the adult can be confused with dun. Well, a dun and an adult are very close to the same thing. But we need to make that determination with our eyes, and once we've determined that trout is not eating the adult, that is eating the emerger, then we have to put on an emerger pattern, and it has to be the same thing. It has to make an image, it has to make has to be the right size and right color. When we do all that right, okay, then we're going to eliminate refusals. So when we get back to the very beginning of what we hear and what we're taught, excuse me, and what we learn is that when a trout refuses your fly, here's some things you can do. Okay, now we're right back to the beginning. Try a smaller size fly, or try a smaller diameter tippet, and try a different fly. These are the things we're doing to get that trout to continue the trigger strike into taking our fly. Wait a minute now, what about tippet? Why are we changing the size of the tippet? Because you can untrigger a trout, and that's the whole point, is the most important of the trigger mechanism of the three is we have to make sure that we're triggering that trout at a distance in the mirror. The refusal is generally made once the fly reaches their circle of vision. At that point, you know, it can be that fly can be that far from the trout's nose, and it's just going to go back down again. So, again, what has happened here? Okay, well, the trout's been refuse your fly, but we had triggered that trout. We had triggered the trout, and what happened is not that it refused your fly so much as that we untriggered that trout, and that's the key point here, is we untriggered it. Getting back to tippet, is it saw the tippet in the meniscus. Okay, it saw the tippet in the meniscus, and that can untrigger a trout. Movement on shore can untrigger a trout. A bird flying overhead. You know, there's many things that can untrigger a trout, but really the top three are the wrong fly, the wrong size, and the wrong diameter tippet. So for example, in wintertime, we want to use really, really light tippet, like a 6X. And during the summer, it's generally 5X. And if you're up in the mountains and freestone rivers, usually 4X. Or if you're on a river where they don't really care, you get away with 4X. But you have to do this whole approach when you can't get a trout to take your artificial fly during a hatch when there's obvious feeding going on. So wrong fly, wrong size, wrong color, not making an impression. Well, I hope this helps you. Certainly in the wintertime when we have a lot of fish rising to midges and whatnot, size becomes very, very important, and color becomes very, very important. These things are all critical aspects of helping you understand why a trout's refusing your fly and what you can do to make it take your fly. So, somewhere, somehow, I hope to see you on the river.